this. Tomorrow we're going to be perfected. This event is brought to you today by CADA International and also by Diaspora Global. It's part of our Healing Conversation series, and the conversation topic today is how to navigate the new educational landscape. And we're talking about that in content as it relates to both COVID-19 and also the overall state of our education in the country. My name is Sonia Wignall, and I am the moderator today, and I'm also a former homeschool mom. This conversation is very dear to my heart because I committed and went through the process of working with my son from the time that he was practically a newborn all the way through, and even today, we're still in the process of perpetual learning. So we wanted to bring on some women that also had experience doing it differently, and all of them ended up with just amazing stories and amazing results, not to mention amazing challenges that go along with the journey. So today on our team, we have Felicia, Logan, Mitchell. Felicia is a homeschool mom also, and she's also a PhD candidate, and her field is international education. That's Felicia. Say, hey, Felicia. Okay. The next person we're going to introduce is going to be Christi McCully. Christi McCully, also a former homeschool mother. Christi McCully also is the founder of the Foundry, but don't let that fool you. Before that, Christi started a homeschool program. She also started the first charter school in our community, which had a waiting list. And then she moved into the STEM high school space, and that's where she's now. And each of these women has moved through, been able to get a chance, as soon as I'm finished, begin sharing where they are and part of their story individually. The third person in our panel today is Sharon Green. And Sharon is another woman out of the homeschool mom space. Amazing things that she did with her 3 boys. And Sharon now is founder of Bloomtree, Inc., which is a company that's specializes in the educational space. And she works with parents, she works with children, she's a consultant, and she's going to expound on that also. So I'm going to turn this over now. We're going to start with Sharon. So thank you. You're on the screen. We're going to start with you. Tell us a little bit about who you are, your children, and what you're doing now.
I'm a mother of 3 male sons. 2 are college graduates, or one is about to be a senior in college and a graduate of college. And then I also have one who just graduated from high school today. Yay, COVID, we were able to work it out and have a wonderful graduation on today. And he will be going into his freshman year of high school, of college. I homeschooled for 12 years, my sons, and then they eventually went on to boarding school and on to private day school. Now are grown men living their lives, doing wonderful and amazing things.
Okay. Tell us, Sharon, a little bit about Bloomtree.
So Bloomtree, Inc. is a education consulting and coaching business that I started. People kept asking me, what is the formula? What is the formula? And I said, well, I don't know if there's a formula, but there is a process of how to purposely and passionately raise your young children, and so that they can become productive citizens of the world. So I work with families and helping them guide through the educational process based on doing an assessment of the kids as well as the family, and see what the benefits are as far as schools are concerned, and if they choose to do schooling at home or homeschooling. And I make a clear distinction between schooling at home and homeschooling. Schooling at home meaning that they have a virtual program that they are a part of, that they work with, and that they have teachers who they are assigned to and do the assignments. Homeschooling is where the parents are doing the actual work with the student. They are the teacher, the principal, the counselor, the headmaster, all rolled into one, and they are correcting and doing all of the work on a daily basis. And so I assist the families in making sure they are doing the best fit for their family. And if they want to change it, which always, every day is a new day, and we're learning that in COVID, that they have me as a resource to allow that to happen.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, now we're going to move to Christi. Christi McCully. We're waiting. There's always a little tiny bit, just FYI, a little tiny bit of delay as we move through the different persons. But Christi McCully, tell us about your journey and tell us where you are now.
Sure. My name is Christi McCully. I have two wonderful kids, a son who is 28 and a daughter who is 27. I always said that I was the Jonah of homeschooling. We did public school, and my son, it just really didn't work for. He's very much a very creative, out of the box thinker. Energy was really kind of crushing his spirit, and that's not what I wanted to see. And so we went to private parochial school. And that didn't work for very long. And so I finally resigned myself to homeschooling. And ironically, that's what stuck. And we homeschooled all the way through high school. But there was always some things about school that I had really missed that I had wanted to be able to give my own kids. And so we started homeschool co-ops with probably about 100 people. One for middle school that was called The Bridge, that's been in existence now for about 20 years. And another one called Soaring Eagles that was in existence for probably about 12 or 14 years. When my kids graduated, I was kind of like, gosh, what am I going to do now? My son lives in Manhattan, and he works in computer security. He did a very non-traditional route. He was always a non-traditional kind of kid. He did not go to college. He had a full scholarship and chose not to take it. And he kind of went the hard way about it, but he's doing fantastic. And he designed his own process. And in some ways I can look at, homeschooling and say that prepared him for his future too. Our daughter graduated from High Point University in North Carolina and works in accounting and lives in Asheville, North Carolina. Super proud of both of them. It's amazing what they accomplished. And, sometimes they accomplished despite me as their homeschool parent. But anyway, so we started homeschool co-ops. When my kids graduated, it was kind of like, what do I want to do when I grow up? And after some thought, I realized, education has always been my passion. I feel so passionately about it because it's really the great equalizer. It's what gives all of us opportunities later in life. And I had so many people who'd come to me when we were homeschooling and said, will you please homeschool my kids? I can't afford to homeschool. Can you help me out? Well, that's not how homeschooling necessarily works. So what I chose to do is, with an amazing group of people who helped me out, we actually went through a 4-year process to start the first charter school here in Fayette County, Liberty Tech. And Liberty Tech is now, I think, in its 4th year. Super cool. It was always supposed to go through high school, but they had to make a very difficult choice in their first year of only going kindergarten through 8th grade. Financially, they just couldn't do high school. And so a bunch of the parents came to me and said, can you do something? And my word means a lot to me. And I had said that we would have this opportunity, but I knew how long it took to start a state charter school. And so I said I could do it, but it's going to have to be a private school, and it's going to have to be pretty small. And so we are now in the 3rd year of the Foundry in Peachtree City, which is an amazingly, it's a college prep rigorous program that's also engaging. We believe very strongly in the genius of and, not the tyranny of or. And so it is engaging and it's rigorous. It's fun and it's challenging. And so we meet kids where they are. We make learning real and relevant and hands-on. And it has been a fantastic few years so far.
Okay, thank you, Christi, for that. Our 3rd panelist is Felicia. Felicia, tell us some of your story and tell us also where you are now.
I've been homeschooling. Well, I did homeschool for about 25 years. And I too, like you, Sonia, I was kind of led early on when my children were very, very young. And my oldest son was very precocious. He was one that goes about asking questions about everything. And, you know, when I found out the concept of what homeschooling was, I said, well, this is pretty much the extension of what I do and how I had started off in home. And so I just said, well, okay, I can do this. You know, I said, I was really led to do this as I look back on it. But each of my children, and I will say to Sonia also with the 3 boys, I think there is special grace for mothers who raise and teach their sons. I have 3 sons. And so through the process, each one was very different. But I went through from kindergarten, well, pre-K, all the way through high school. But as the changes and the needs became apparent, I had to kind of do things slightly different. So instead of, from coming from homeschooling to schooling at home, I eventually, as we got up into the STEM courses, I ended up having to find those within the homeschool support group who were able to teach those specific courses. So in that way, they were able to get the needs met where it came to the STEM classes. But as it turns out, my last son finished high school in 2016. My middle son just graduated in the first all-time virtual graduation class of 2020 from college. And my oldest son finished his college career in 2016, but he was an exchange student. He went to the University of South Korea in business. So he had an amazing experience there. He's currently now in grad school at Brandeis University, but he's doing it online. And my middle son, who just graduated, is trying to get into vet school. So I'm extraordinarily proud of all of them. My youngest son is still kind of trying to make his way, trying to figure it out, what he wants to do. But I know and feel confident that he's going to find it. So that's pretty much, in a nutshell, my experience with them. As Sonia was sharing at the top of the program, I also am a doctoral student at North Central University conducting a study of the experiences and transformative processes of African American homeschooling educators' use of teaching their students from an Afrocentric cultural, ethnic, and spiritual context within their homeschool programs. So, but, you know, my specialty area is international education. And, you know, some may ask, well, what is that and why? Well, I guess because of my experience with some of the reasons why I chose to homeschool my kids was because I knew, I knew that the educational program was not working in the public school system. And even to the point of some private schools, parochial schools, because sometimes I used to see that as reform schools for a lot of parents when their kids would get, kicked out. But I started to get into that. And I said, no, that's not what I wanted for my sons. So I guess what happened was, as I had introduced cultural, courses for my kids, because I wanted them to know who they were. And it got me to looking at the world at large, and come to find out that through the legacy of slavery and the legacy of colonizations, the issues were the same worldwide. And so I kind of focused my attention on looking at the opportunity to try to work towards a Pan-African or Afrocentric type of curriculum. And so working towards eventually developing that, and looking around the globe and finding others of like mind who was interested. But it's been a hard, struggle. But that's kind of how I ended up in international education.
Amazing. Amazing. My goodness gracious. I feel like I'm sitting at the table with some pretty high achieving women, which you are. So, if we take that narrative, all of you ladies are high achieving. All of you ladies did something very similar. And although the homeschooling process that a lot of people don't understand, a lot of people think there's a couple of very negative narratives out there of homeschooling, right? That our children, and sometimes going into any kind of educational space that's very different than the very traditional space, you get a lot of pushback on it, right? It's not going to work. Your child is not going to have good social skills. They have this, some people have this crazy thing, a lot of times on the news, we hear of some child doing something, crazy, or a group of crazy parents that kept their children, in basements for years or something. And the quote that comes out of that, and they were homeschooled. And so a lot of people develop very negative narrative that our children are somehow not being exposed, but they're sitting in some corner either babbling or not functional. And nothing can be further from the truth. The very fact that we have committed to sort of putting our lives on hold and just committed to the process of working with our children, no matter what the obstacle was, committing to the journey, just meant that we not only were expecting, but we saw results that were extraordinary. And we didn't fall back, and prey to, your child is not going to make it, your child is going to be antisocial, your child is going to be weird, that's a weird thing you're doing. We saw and we looked at our children as not only as gifts, but as a responsibility that we had to prepare these children to be contributors and market leaders. And I'm hearing those kind of results from every single woman on this panel. And when we began to put this project together, and I began calling some of the homeschool moms, those were the same exact results after results after results after results. In fact, I had to limit to how many homeschool moms could come on. But if we did a survey across the board, every single one of them, their children are exceptional in what they do. There's so much to be covered today. And of course, we're going to come back tomorrow at 3 o'clock and continue the conversation. I wanted to stop for a minute before we continue, though, and give some thanks to some people that are not seen on camera, that are behind the scene, that really made all of this possible. I am doing the narration. I did a lot of connectivity with the women and the panelists, but we had an entire team working in the background that you can't see. Ludlow Bailey from CADA International is our executive director, and he was the one that put together everything that was going on behind the scenes. So we want to give him a thank you, a mighty thank you. And one of the reasons he took on this project was because he himself has a great passion for education, and he himself has amazing children that he have helped and developed, and his children are out there doing amazing things. The second person is our tech manager, and we are, thank you, Michael. Michael Fong is in the background also, and he's the one that's managing our tech space and making sure that you can see us and hear us. And he has done an amazing job of putting all of this together technologically. There's 3 other players. They were working under Ludlow's guidance, and they were in the marketing and the social media space, and all these are young, vibrant people. And the first one is Akulo, Jeremiah Akulo is from Nigeria, and he's literally working on the marketing and the social media from his base in Nigeria. The other one is Darren Reed. Darren has been working with the Ludlow over the years, and he's amazing also in the social media space, and Darren is working out of New York. And the third one is an FIU student that we actually met, Bria Jones. And Bria, we met when Ludlow was doing a very specific interview piece, and the students of FIU was part of that. It's called Incipio, and you can look at that online. It's an amazing interview piece. And so Bria came to us, highly recommended, and she has been off the chain. So we want to be able to thank all the people that is making everything you're seeing here possible. So we had a pretty, very knowledgeable and very passionate team about this subject. So as we move on, I want to tell you guys a little tiny bit more about my story. Unlike the other ladies here, I went into the homeschool space as a single mom. That brought for me a number of challenges, but of course we all know with every challenge is a number of possibilities and options that's always available to you. I began the homeschool process when my son was a newborn. I read somewhere that if you put books all over your house, in all the rooms of your home, your child, it will help your child perpetually see books in front of him or her, but it also developed in the child a desire for reading. And that, I took that and I ran with that. So every bathroom, the kitchen, the downstairs, every room in our home has books in it. Our guest room, it's just books, all kinds of books. I would go to garage sales, and I was on a very, 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 and I cannot emphasize that enough, limited budget. So I had to be not only creative, but I had to be very focused on where I wanted. So, the idea of focus and purpose comes into play because the very first thing I had to do was make that commitment that this is the end game that I want for my son. And I told him all the time, I said, I pour into your education, not so you could do anything specific, but you can have choices to do whatever specific you wanted to do. So if you took all the lessons you've learned and all the experiences you had, and you decided to go sit under a tree and play the banjo, you were sitting under that tree by choice, not because you were forced to, or that's the only option you had. And I kept that in front of him. You always, the more educated you are, the more experience you are, the more options you will have. And so I wanted to create an environment where my son would always know and always have options. And that was so powerful for me. So I looked at him as a gift that I had been given, and then I looked at him as a responsibility to give back. So I framed our entire life, believe it or not, around that, around vision of giving him options and the purpose of getting him to a place where he could know how to exercise his options. And so everything we did was centered around it. There were 2 women that were just amazingly influential in my life, and I would like to give them credit. One of them was my sister, and she's an educator. And my sister has educated 2 children. One of them is an attorney, and the other one is an administrator at a college in the international department. And my sister put her children in private schools because her family was able to take that. And when they were not able to care for that, my sister went to work at the school to make sure her children had access. But one of the things she did at home, she and her husband both, they worked consistently with their children, no matter what educational system their children was in. They worked with the children at home. They didn't just leave the entire educational system outside of their home. And so my sister said to me one day, I remember when my son, I think he was about 12, 13 years old, he didn't have much toys, and I would not buy toys that made noise. I bought toys. To me, the toy was an investment. So I remember buying one of those square blocks, wood blocks, and it comes in different things. You know, it comes in animals, and you can pick them up and put them in the right slot, or letters or numbers or whatever. And I had bought the alphabet for my son, and I believe he was in a crib, so he had to be under 2 years old. And I remember putting that big wooden block in the crib, and I took some of the letters out. I said, oh, this is too much. You know, just take some of the letters out. And I was telling my sister, and she said, put every letter back in the crib. And I said, no, he can't do it. She said, no. That's your limitation. Those are not his. Put every letter back in and see what he's able to do. And to my amazement, within a very short period, that baby had put every letter in the place where it belonged. And that was a turning point for me, because it made me realize my son had skills and ability beyond what I could see. And as long as I only saw him limited, his education would be limited. But as long as I kept in my mind that all things were possible, then I could teach him that all things were possible. So then I had to make a second choice. I can't put him in the schools, because if I put him in the schools, they're going to pigeonhole him into a certain spot based on the day he was born, the month he was born, and the age he's in. And so their education for him is going to be limited. And here I was, a single mom, you know, financially not able to really handle this, and started a business, started motherhood, very little money. And when I say that, I'm bringing that forward because so many mothers or so many families are in that space. Today on the news, they talked about a woman who was a single mom, and she's so concerned about schools being closed. How is she going to manage her child's school being closed when she cannot go to work? What is she going to do as a single mom? So we're here to tell you, if we did it, you can do it too. And we're here to share some of the challenges we have, but also so much of the victories that we walk through. And there were many, many a days where I had to decide between, you know, Pampers and books, or Pampers and, you know, gas or whatever. And okay, we're just going to rinse this Pampers out, and we're going to put gas in the car, you know. And so I've walked through that journey, and I know what it's like, but I also know what the end results could be. And today, after, you know, 18 years of homeschooling, my son, at 15 years old, when it was time for him to work, we launched Lego robotics in our home. And because we needed a Lego team, we couldn't find one. And so I just started it. I'm a lot like Christi. I'm a starter of things. The things that I needed for my son that I couldn't get, I would start. When I found my son was gifted to play golf, golf is expensive. The golf shoes, the golf balls, the golf clubs, the golf this, the golf that, the lessons for him to get good at. I started homeschool golf, and I put the word out. Anybody wants to teach your children homeschool golf, come, you know, and we found a coach at the golf course. And I said, if I brought you other mothers, could you teach us for $10? Golf lessons are between $45, $80 and up. And here I am asking a man for $10. And he said, yes. And I said, whoa, amazing. And there's a whole series of amazing things that happen in the space. But in the end, my son ended up, you know, 3 years on the golf course. And in his very last year, he was not only doing golf tournaments, but he also was winning and placing first, second, and third in 9 out of 10 tournaments that he did in his last year. And there's so much more to that story, so much more support and help we got through in that season. We started the Lego robotics in our home, and our neighbor became the coach. And when it was time for my son to work, I said, you don't need to go outside the home, teach Lego robotics. So we did. And at 15 years old, he started teaching. He taught 15, he taught 16, he taught 17. And then when he turned 17 years old, we created a business out of it called Virtual Technology, and you can go online and see his company. And since 15 years old until COVID-19 hit in March, my son has worked with hundreds of students from first grade to high school. He had several school contracts, after school contracts. He did camps We hired other people to come in and work at the company. So his story, like so many other stories, is amazing. And ours started with $0, you know, and you know, a used alphabet plate. And so that's what we're here to do today, to share with you, whether you're a single mom or not a single mom, whether your family is wealthy or you're looking at limited resources, the options and the opportunities remain there for you, and you can do it. If I could do it, if Sharon can do it, if Felicia can do it, if Christi can do it, if the ladies you're going to meet tomorrow can do it, you can do it. We all had challenges. It was super difficult at times for all of us. A lot of us, I don't know anything about math. I don't know anything about, you know, not anything. I mean, I'm not in the math space. I'm not in science space. But yet again, my son got science. My son got physics. My son got math. My son got piano. My son got golf. My son, you know, the only limitation, going back to what my sister said, is what you place on yourself. Because often we take our own limitations and we map it on top of somebody else and say, this is all that you can do. And we found out in the process that if we did that, we were wrong. The other person I wanted to mention that was an enormous influence was a woman named Vanessa Jones. And Vanessa, I put my son in the Kumon Center, and Vanessa owned a Kumon Center, and she was working with him. And what I would do is sometimes if I was busy or I needed to work and I wanted him to just get out of my hair, I'd plug the TV on and threw him in front of the TV. And Vanessa said, no, you can't do that. And she got me to get him out of the TV, away from the TV. And she started teaching me just to take shaving cream and put it in a plate or something and have him work the shaving cream to help with his dexterity. Simple things. Going to Home Depot or going to Lowe's and picking up paint samples. You know, you have all the different paint company has paint cards. On those cards are colors, all the colors you can possibly need. Another way to teach your child colors. You can go into the dollar store. They have all kinds of rulers and things that you can use as part of your homeschool. My sister took me back to noise, and she said, he can just use pots and pans in your home and plastic things and wood things and hit on them and teach him all the different noises. So there was a lot of different ways that I incorporated in the learning process. And obviously, as he got older, we had to make significant changes. But we want to let you guys know that we are here to share our story. And again, if we can do it, you can do it also. So now as I take it back to the ladies, I want to, and by the way, we're going to be getting some questions from the audience from Facebook, which we're live, as well as YouTube, and we will be responding to some of those questions. I want to take it back to Sharon, because Sharon, you're working with parents on such a broad range right now. You're seeing kind of firsthand some of the issues that is going on. Talk to us about COVID-19 and the general space of education right now.
Well, I think that for all of us, we're shocked, right? We had no understanding of what this was. When we first started COVID, we were introduced to being sheltered in place. We initially thought it would be a 2-week process and that we could go back to the normal. And then it became 6 weeks, and then it became 12 weeks. And so now Zoom became our best friend as far as showing how to educate our students. And it was a major shift for all of us to learn the technology, figure out ways to keep the kids engaged. And then on the other half of that, students were at home, parents were at home. Students are doing schooling at home. Parents still had to work at home. And so now we're looking at how is the behaviors of these kids going on? Are they attentive? Are they engaged? Oh my gosh, they don't know how to do the math the way I thought it was. And so all these things started to come up. And then also being in small spaces. Some of us had the luxury of being in spaces where everyone could be in their own room, but majority of us were not in those situations. And then also technology. We realized that a lot of kids did not have the bandwidth at home for the technology that was needed. And so we all had to scramble and just figure it all out. Now we're at a point of just kind of taking a breath. And so what I've been doing is talking to parents about how do we cope during COVID. And so the first thing I always tell them is that finding the calm in a crisis, when unplanned things happen, we need to feel out. We're feeling like we're out of control, and that's normal. So first of all, we want to give each other grace. Just give everybody grace of what's happening in the world and what's happening in your immediate community and what's happening in your home. Just take a moment. There are no gaps. There are no absolute gaps at all that we are now going to say, let's work on character, let's work on our academic skills, and let's work on our home ec skills, right? Now we have the ability to say and incorporate to give kids the life skills of cleaning, cooking, planning recipes, planning menus, looking at dietary needs, and incorporating exercise. So the first thing I say that it's always important to create a safe space that enables the parent and the child to have access to a new way of living, and that some ground rules are set. I don't necessarily recommend a schedule, but I do recommend routine, and that we're all being flexible in that. What I have seen with families is it's like, what do we do next? How do we get this done? I can't do this. I'm not afraid. I am afraid. I don't know what to do. I can't teach them. Can you teach them for me? So first and foremost, as a coach with parents, I say, okay, let's assess what's going on. How can we, or I, help you set some goals, and what are you looking for during this time? And also really be supportive and encouraged that this is all brand new to every one of us, and it changes daily. Sometimes it changes hourly. During that time period, that we should not be frantic to want to react, but take some time to respond. Also, give the kids grace. Know that they too are really dealing with this in a major way. We're seeing a higher rate of depression and use of illicit drugs for our high schoolers and our college students. For our younger students, we're seeing that they're really focusing on using social media a lot more, because they're no longer socially engaged with their friends. They've been locked off, not from a gradual perspective, but just immediately cut off. So what it is that we need to really be in tune with is listening to each other, giving each other space and the time, and not always wanting to say, well, let's do this next, and you have to get this done next. Really be present and observe what's going on. Another thing that I've heard from parents is, well, how do I get them out of their room? Well, you don't have to necessarily get them out their room. You just engage them. You can check on them, knock on the door, see what's going on. Also create family time, and also maybe time where they're engaged in doing some volunteer activities. Yes, you can do volunteer work online. Independence is important for them to have, and they're just trying to figure it out. So I give tips. Some of the tips is boredom is an option. Students are sitting around trying to figure out what's next. They can be bored, and sometimes you might, if you have the ability to send them outside to social distance and play games with their friends, then that's a really wonderful opportunity for them to do. Reading is cool, and if, like Sonia alluded to earlier, being able to have books all around the house so that they can do that. It's okay if you can't teach math. It's okay if you can't teach language arts. Find others who can help you do that. We have a village, or create a village of people who enjoy that. You would be really surprised at that uncle, that aunt, or friend who really loved teaching, or enjoyed reading, or enjoyed music, and can now transfer those skills to your child. Home ec is on your side. We all have chores to do in the home, and it's time to now split it up. A 5-year-old can do something very minor or major, depending on their developmental skills, as well as your teenager. lastly, it's we all have choices. And as we make those choices, it's important that our children understand and you understand that choices are there and that there are always consequences. Consequences aren't a bad thing. They just are. Be intentional on how you communicate in the home. You know, normally you might get a little angst about just being all enclosed for days on end. And so just really think about, is this something that you want to say or you need to say? And is it always something I tell my children all the time? It's not always about being right. It's about doing the right thing. Model time alone and self-care. Give your space and tell your children, hey, I'm mommy or daddy's taking time right now for our own self-care. You do the same. What does that look like? It could be painting. It could be running in the neighborhood. It could be cooking. You know, just showing them that mom and dad need time alone. Honor the feelings and emotions. This is a very unprecedented time, and we just have no idea what's going on. Mask on, mask off. Safety, unsafe. Socialize, stay 6 feet apart, don't stay 6 feet apart. The kids are getting all kinds of messages on a daily basis, and so it's important to check in with their emotions and see how they're feeling. And then lastly, how do we get back? Get back to your friends, get back to others that you might not know. There's a lot of things online that allow us to volunteer. So in the nutshell, that is what I share on a daily basis to families about COVID and the effects and the trauma behind it.
Awesome. Awesome, Sharon. Thank you very much. My goodness. I just keep saying my goodness because I've known these women and I met, except for Felicia, I met Sharon and Christi, and then also a lot of the women tomorrow. I met them when Manny was 5 years old, 6 years old, in that time period. And it's amazing to see 15 years later, now, not just, or 16 years later, not just how the children have developed, but the amazing skill set that's coming out of this home space. It's almost as if, you know, we were, this thing inside of us was growing and developing as we were working with our children. And the irony is we put so much of that thing on hold. You know, some of this burst of knowledge and burst of experience and burst of gift is the only way I could describe it. We put those on hold. And you could see from all the women here that it was after the children got to a certain milestone that they burst into the marketplace, you know, and they didn't burst into the marketplace shivering and shaking. They went into the marketplace, you know, very forward market leaders. I could tell you, Christi's school, Liberty Tech, had, I don't know if it still has, a wait list of both teachers and students trying to get into that school. So you just think that through. And she was coming out of a homeschool space. Sharon, listen to the experience that she has gathered, have self-taught, have watched, and have, you know, participated in, for her to be able to turn around and coach and speak to the family on all the different levels holistically that she talks to the family about. Felicia, for her to, you know, train these boys and then burst into the PhD space. And she didn't get there overnight. It was a process. But for her to gather all the skills that she's gathered to sit here today, to me, it's just, when I think back, I can only think amazing, amazing, amazing. I want to turn to Christi real quick. And before I do that, though, I want to address something. There's a gentleman on my Facebook that wrote me a note, and he said, this flyer looks good, the event looks good, but it's all about women, you know? And we want to make it very clear, it's not about women, it's about families. It's not just the mother, the homeschool mother that's part of the process. The homeschool father is an integral part of the process in supporting his wife, in in helping her through it, in providing structure, who's helping with the discipline. A lot of homeschool mothers are stay-at-home mothers. So that means that they have to have an economic source beyond something they're doing part-time to make their family work. And hence the father comes in. And he comes in on a lot of different ranges. He has to provide support for her, right? When she's totally, at her wit's end, as Sharon just finished talking about self-care. And we're going to go more into self-care a little later on. But, providing nurturing, support, love, understanding for her and for the children. So we don't want anyone to get the impression that it's a mom space or that the fathers are not an integral part. As a matter of fact, one of the other talks we're going to do is going to be the father's space in education. And it's just going to be a panel of men talking about this very subject. So as we talk about the nucleus of the family as it relates to the educational process, I'm going to bring it home to Christi. And Christi, you did it. Your process is so interesting because you went through, you said public, you went through parochial, then you moved into the homeschool space and built, you put it in several different programs. I remember also you were teacher in the science space in a homeschool, but then you also took it into charter space, and then now you took it into the STEM high school space. So your range is really, really, really broad. I want you to speak on or talk to us about the engagement process of the family, the whole family, as it relates to, bringing up that child, educating, children in a more holistic manner.
Sure, absolutely. When I started homeschooling, I looked at school as being my job. My husband went off to work every day, and my job was to raise these kids. And so for me, learning wasn't just curriculum, which is one of the concerns that I see a lot. I'm still on a lot of homeschool Facebook pages, and all of these poor moms who are facing homeschooling, which they had never thought that they would be in that boat before. And so the one question I keep seeing is, what curriculum should I use? And which is what we all think of to begin with when we first start. But especially for younger kids, oh my gosh, get a couple of workbooks and do life. For science, take the kids out and plant flowers and give them a little notebook and let them draw the seed as it comes up from, beneath the ground all the way up, and understand and start identifying what all the different parts of the plant are. Visit art museums, go and to the library and get these amazing books, and involve dad in it. This isn't just something that you do. This is something that everyone does. We would get, my son in particular, he a real out of the box thinker. I think I may have mentioned that before. And we had a particularly trying day, and I had just gone in and I was probably, making dinner, slamming spoons around and cooking up and thinking, why am I doing this? And all of a sudden it got really quiet. And you know that when you have kids and it gets really quiet, there's something that's up. So I went looking for Sean, and he was outside on the porch. He had gotten in, and he's like in 5th grade probably. He had gotten an encyclopedia out. He had my meat thermometer, and he had a Bunsen burner, because Dan and I would do little science experiments for the kids. And he had one of my earrings. So I asked him, it was holding the earring over the fire, and he had the meat thermometer on it. And he was saying, and I asked him, I said, Sean, what are you doing? Because the encyclopedia is open over here. He said, well, according to the encyclopedia, this is supposed to be the melting point of this particular metal. And I just wanted to test it and see if it was true. So at that point, it was kind of like, okay, I think we're doing okay. It may be a little bit frustrating. There may be times that it's absolutely exhausting. But gosh, just like you had said before, look at the results that we're getting. I mean, I have curious kids who enjoy learning, which is what it's really kind of all about. But as far as the engagement from the family goes, your family, certainly we have my husband and my 2 kids, and encouragement from grandparents and everybody else. But the family becomes the people that you do life with. And just like you, Sonia, or so many other, Barbara, for instance, we started these little micro schools that involved other people who could teach things that I couldn't teach. I teach, the only language I know is Southern. So, and that doesn't really qualify for a foreign language according to colleges. So I needed to find somebody that could help us in that area. And you don't want me teaching math. I can assure you, I can do science, I can do English, I can do history. Math and language are definitely 2 things that I cannot do. And so, we started getting to know other people and doing life with them. And for people who are facing COVID and have made the decision to bring their kids home, don't put them in front of a computer. Don't make them do this canned curriculum every day. Find friends that you can do together with to engage your children and find different ways of approaching things. Make it hands-on. Make it fun. And I think that you're going to be a lot happier with the results.
Wow, the engagement of the parent. Okay, Felicia, you want to respond to that also?
Yes, Christi is right. And as all of us who have homeschooled, you quickly find out that when you're first stepping into this, the first thing that you go to is what you know. And what you know is what you've participated in when you were a student yourself. But I can assure you, for me, when I was teaching my kids, we did a variety of things because, as you all will probably cover more tomorrow, each child is different in the way they learn. And so I had to learn what worked for one student or one child does not mean it works for another. And I had to come about, transforming as I recognized what worked for one and what didn't. For some, for one of my sons, my middle son, he was more hands-on and visual and loves color. So I had to find books and things that he could build and he could, he would read based on what he saw in the books. And he got excited and he was terribly engaged with that. My other 2 sons were more about, they liked a little bit more structure. But the bottom line is my approach to schooling as I transformed through the process, it was all about object lessons. So, for instance, I have a cute little story that I'll share. When my youngest was about maybe 4 years old, I had been teaching my kids when we go to the grocery store, I'm all about organics. And I said, how do you know which items are organic and which are not? So we went to the produce aisle and I picked up an apple and I would say, do you see how it's shining? I said, that's wax on this apple, And so they start to learn how to tell that which is organic from that which is not. That's just an object lesson. But this same, I think he was 4 years old, came up to a woman and he was just talking to them because, when you're homeschooling, people keep saying, oh, you're so patient, you're so patient. But as she was speaking, he noticed her tongue. And he says, oh, you have white all on your tongue. You're full of toxins. But I mean, it's just living life. And what is your purpose? What is your vision for what you want your child to learn? So I had to, and I was one not to do the television thing either. you did not, even though they tried to find ways around getting their work done, but I caught on. But basically, I think the bottom line is you have to know your children and what their learning style is. What works for one will not necessarily work for the other. So as you learn, what an opportunity for you to get to know even the more how your child is, so that you can find the things that work for him.
Okay, we have we're going to be going into into this conversation on a little slightly more personal level, but before that, we have a question from the audience. Could we put the question up from the audience? Okay, and the question is, and I quote, it says here, what are the things that older siblings, possibly college students, can do to help younger siblings K through 12 in school? Does anybody want to take that on?
I will. I think that it is important for them to develop a relationship, but not a teacher-student relationship, especially if they're siblings. It's more of engaging and supporting whatever the academic track that the younger student is on, and that they're looking to their older sibling to enhance it, but that they not feel required that this person is now my instructor, because that can kind of get a little tricky. I have, my oldest is 24 and my youngest is 18 now, but that 6-year difference when you're younger, it can cause, the sibling issues that you don't, especially in COVID time when you can't get out, that you don't necessarily want to do that. But what I would say is whatever hobbies are available for them maybe to do together. Sometimes reading time, have the older sibling to read to them and engage with them in activities. But I would not necessarily have them be the instructor. They can always guide them in math and science and other areas, but not to be the instructor for the particular work that they're doing.
Okay. Anybody else?
Can I add something, Sonia?
Yeah.
I think at this time in which a lot of the college students are actually doing school at home, what an amazing example that they are to their siblings, because they're sitting there working on their college classes, and our students, our K through 12 kids are watching them. And wow, my big brother, they're doing their school. I need to be doing mine too. So sometimes the lessons and the support that's there is not spoken or is not orchestrated. It's something that's very organic.
I love that. Felicia, did you want to respond to that?
I'll just add one more thing. You always hear the complaints about, homeschool kids are not socialized. But what better example to watch the interactions of older siblings with the younger siblings?
That's amazing. I want to go back to something that Sharon kind of touched on a little bit, but I want to bring it in from a different perspective. One of the things that I found, and for me personally, I came out of, just FYI, I came out of a corporate environment. I was a corporate executive at a hotel. I was involved in sales and marketing. I was in that season, of a pearl around my neck and a suit and high heel shoes, practically 6 days a week, because of course 5 days in a hotel as an executive, and then sometimes you had to go in and work on a Saturday if you had a group or if you had a special program. I also traveled to Central America, and I traveled to the Bahamas, and I did different projects on behalf of the property. So I was not only on the ready, but I had to be polished and on the ready at all times. So I came out of that space and I came into this mom space. And then right in between that space and the mom space, I was working for a company, a small company that was growing. And I kind of helped them, put them on the map. From a marketing standpoint, I was, again, in this corporate gear from head to toe. And I was going out on new business development calls for them. And I was a mouthpiece for the company and helping them get large contracts and things like that. So to move into this mom space, you know, the heels came off, the pearls came off, you know, getting the nails done on a regular basis came off, going to the beauty salon came off. I was in flip-flops, I was in baggy pants, I was in a t-shirt, and that was my primary gear for, or my primary apparel for the, it would be my primary apparel for the next 18 years. Also, as a single woman, you know, I had a boyfriend at the time, you know, I had to, had to put that away, right? Because again, vision and purpose. I didn't want my son to, and you ladies just talked about that, about mirroring, or you talked about setting that example. I did not want, and I'm not at all advocating that anyone do this. I'm just sharing with you what I felt was necessary for me to do. I laid aside the boyfriend and the dating and all of that. And again, I took up this homeschool, you know, kind of like a Superman banner, and I just ran with it, you know, Superman, super homeschool mom cape, and I ran with it, stumbled with it, but there I was running down the road. So I want us to talk about the sacrifice. One of the homeschool moms shared a story with me yesterday of being in a store, in a paint store, and she saw another woman in there, and the woman was on the phone talking about her child, and the woman was saying, yeah, and I'm going to paint the room, and I'm going to fix it up and put him in there, and that's what we're going to do. And then I myself, in the work that I do now, I work with a lot of vendors. I work, you know, I am co-founder of the company that's putting this project together. And I'm also owned another company. And so in the work that I do in my workspace, I'm on the phone with vendors, suppliers, and clients all day long. And when COVID started and I'm making calls, I'm talking to people and say, how are you doing? I'm okay. What's the matter? My kid is here. You know, it was just a disdain for their child being in their space. You know, the child was taking up too much space. The child was in their space. And it just saddened me, because when I think of my son, I think of a gift. I don't think of somebody that was in my space or was a bother. I'm going to be very transparent. There were days that I was probably screaming, and there was probably days that I was frustrated and figuring, what am I doing it, or why? But is this really going to give me the results I want? And of course, you question that, but I never expressed that verbally to my child. I never told my child that you're a bother, or you're in my space, or would you get out of here? I remember talking to one mom, and in the business space, she was very polite and very professional. And then one day I called her, and we're discussing a project we're working on, and she's screaming at the top of the line, get out of here. I already told you, leave me alone, get out of here. Because a child had an academic related subject bringing to the table, and she did not have time to deal with it. So talk to us about the sacrifice of being a homeschool mom. And I'm going to start with you, Felicia.
Wow. Boy, that's a mouthful, because sometimes I'm still learning. Wow. What comes to my mind is I was not a single parent, but I called myself a part-time parent. Because my husband was commuting back and forth from the state of California to Georgia. When we moved from there to here, he thought his job was going to be set up where he could, you know, be able to set up his, you know, work here, but it did not happen. So for probably 10 years, 12 years, I was kind of doing this on my own. So because my vision and the purpose for why we decided to school our children, every day, or just about every day, I would be thinking, it's incumbent upon me to ensure that they get their educational needs met. And of course, I never factored in the help, you know, of the Most High in all of this, because I was trying to make sure that I did everything I could, because everything that they would take away from their school would be based upon what it was that I taught them, what it was that I brought to them, what it was that was introduced to them. And any areas lacking, I would probably be blaming myself because of that. That's how heavy the responsibility that I felt. All this time, I put them first in everything, put them first. And it took a toll. It took a toll. Though I kept moving with it, but the signs were there. And so I ended up with hypertension, highly stressed, ended up eventually, getting into what do you call it? A panic anxiety attack. And eventually I ended up for about 3 or 4 months having a nervous breakdown. And that was probably 12 years in. But I kept willing myself to make sure that they got what they needed. And like I said, that's one takeaway that I would encourage those who are considering homeschooling. You've got to take time for you. You've got to schedule that in, because that was something I had to learn the hard way. But, all is well now, but I still have to remind myself to schedule in time for me.
Christi?
Sure, absolutely. I'd have to say that, when I got married, I had my plan, okay? And my plan included my finishing my degree. And then I had kids that came along really quick. And there was a time in which I was trying to go and finish my college degree, carrying the baby in the baby carrier. Now, you can only imagine what my professor must have thought. And I had to give up on that dream for a while. So that was a big sacrifice for me. But it made me value education even more so, because I didn't have an education at the time. I couldn't get a job at Books A Million, and I love to read. I never understood that. And so it really became a real drive for me. I felt like I had these kids, and I was given these kids for a reason, and that no one was, they weren't given to, you, Sonia, they weren't given to Barbara, they weren't given to, my friend Lynn, they were given to me for a reason. And it was my responsibility to make sure that I did the best that I possibly can. Now, does that mean that I, was always happy, little house on the prairie? Absolutely not. There was a lot of challenges that went along with that. Sean had ADD, so it was like so much fun trying to keep him on target and stuff like that. And making sure I had time for myself was important. And so sometimes that time might be just being able to pick up the phone and call my husband. My husband was incredibly supportive of whenever I needed to talk, unless there was something going on at work, that he just couldn't talk, he would listen. And that was huge for me. I really needed that. But there was also something that I did, and this is different for everyone. So we had, what we ended up doing is I put a clothesline in the backyard. Now, my kids knew you never said, "Mom, I'm bored." Because if you did, Mom would find something for you to do. And generally, it wasn't always going to be real fun. And so whenever I was at my clothesline, hanging out my clothes, the kids left me alone because they knew that if they were going to come bother me, that meant that they were going to have to help me with the clothes. But it ended up being a great opportunity for me to have a chance to catch my breath, take a deep breath and say, okay, it's going to be okay. And before I went back, to work with the kids. So I did get to finish my education. Once my kids finished college, I have a master's now. And although my plan didn't come into place, I think that there was a bigger plan that I have now on the track for. And I feel particularly fulfilled and love what I'm doing. And I don't know that that would have happened if I'd followed the original and not made the sacrifice that I did.
Awesome. Awesome. Sharon, how about you? What was your sacrifice?
Oh, wow. Well, I didn't come into homeschooling in the, I guess, a way of planning or thinking. My oldest son, who's now 24, was had a major heart condition, and we were told that they could not do his surgery for 1 year. And he was already I had two sons at the time that were school age, and then I had my infant who was under 1 year of age. And he was 7 at the time, the oldest one. And they told us that for 1 year, he was basically a walking time bomb, and that he was not, they couldn't do the surgery. And if he were to go to school, we just didn't know what could happen or not happen. And I was like, well, if anything's going to happen, I don't want someone calling me to tell me to run to the place to go get him. I'd rather him be home with me. So at the time I had to convince my husband that I was going to stay home and that we would just homeschool for a year. Well, after that year, I was like, well, I kind of like this, you know, the freedom of being able to introduce different topics and talk about things and really just engage with my children. And my husband was like, well, are you going back to, I was like, no, I'm not going back to work right now. And so 1 year became the next year, became the next year, became the next year. And it was just really a wonderful transition. We didn't have any parameters around when they were to go to school, if they were to ever go to school. It just was a beautiful transition for them. During that time period, I gave everything up, everything up. There was nothing that was not. It was all about my three, as we call lion cubs. They were my everything and my all. I really listened to them a lot. I watched them. I observed their actions and their desires, those that were said and not said, and I spoke to it. And so I was at tennis all the time. I was at swim. Sonia, you know, we did Kumon together and talking about flexibility and affordability. At the time, I couldn't afford some of the activities, so I bartered. Either I worked at a Kumon center or I was an instructor, parent at the tennis center or track and field. And it paid off. I have 3 amazing sons, like we all do. One is a neuroscientist and working and is dealing with his own mental health challenges, but is being a very wonderful, productive scientist in the world. I have a scholar athlete, and that was how I really started my business, because my first and last student children look amazing on paper. They, you know, perfect scores, SATs, and all that kind of stuff. But my middle son, he was what we call the scholar athlete, and his intelligence was not only in the academic area, but it was in the athletic area. So there were always times that we didn't necessarily see the academic side of, you know, the 100s all the time, the A's, straight A's, but his gift was in athletics. And so now, based on those sacrifices and times of going back and forth to track and field, he's a scholar athlete at a great school, college here in the ACC Northeast, and he is there as their top athlete. And so I say to us, as we talk about this sacrifice, and Christi alluded to this, is that the payoff is great. So now that I have my last son who's graduating from high school, I'm like Christi was a couple of years ago. What do I do for myself? So our children don't ask for sacrifice. So I don't think that it's we should put on and say, I'm sacrificing this for you. We're
Right.
making that personal choice to sacrifice because we know the benefits. And so it's important to be in a collective group of like-minded homeschool or schooling at home families to help support you when those times get rough. Because the sacrifice, you can't see the benefits immediately, but the long-term effects, it definitely pays off.
Yeah, that is amazing. I want to touch on something else. And Sharon, you kind of touched on both of them, and these is two different things that I have here. The first one is we all heard of the strong-willed child, right? That's the child that, most of the time, the child is very, very bright, and it's kind of hard to take instructions. Sometimes one of the things we need to let the parents know, the truth of the matter is our children struggle to take instructions from us. And so, and I'm sure all of you have had that experience and can speak to it. But we all have in our group a strong-willed child. My son has both sides of both range. He can be a very strong-willed, now he's an adult, but he was a very strong-willed child. And yet again, he was a very tender, gentle, compassionate child. I remember one year I got this vision of sending shoes to poor countries, shoes and sandals. So I started setting the word out. People was bringing me all kinds of shoes and sandals, and I was putting them together, and I gave them to a couple of friends, missionaries that were traveling into different countries. And I remember my son coming up to me and saying, Mom, can I take the money out of my piggy bank and buy some shoes that you can have to send to the kids? So on one side of he's very diplomatic, very laid back, and very, obviously very, very responsible, but very compassionate. But on the other side, he has another side to his personality that's not rebellious, but it's very strong-willed, focused, knowing what he wants. And I almost blame myself for that at times, because I always teach him, don't take what everybody says for granted. Process it yourself, look at it yourself, research it yourself, come up with your own conclusion on certain things, so that you're not just following everyone's lead or just following what the herd is doing. And then sometime that played right back into our conversations. And I was like, no. I'm the mother. You listen to everything I said. So it was, 1 minute, please be independent in your thinking. And the other minute, put that independence aside because I said so. So we talked about, having those challenged kids. But another aspect of the challenged child is a child that has challenged learning. Christi, you mentioned your son having ADD, and Sharon, you kind of alluded a little bit to something in one of your sons. Can you ladies speak to that? Speak to the families about having the challenged child, which is either the strong-willed child that's pushing against you working with them, or having the child that is challenged in learning but very much capable. Does anybody want to tap that one?
I can start. What we're finding is that a lot of our students, especially males, are being diagnosed with ADHD, social emotional communications disorder, and that maybe there are areas around trauma that we're now seeing that they're reacting and responding in negative ways in their social behaviors. Now that we're at home with COVID, parents are seeing some things that are glaring and don't have the tools necessary to cope with it on a daily basis. As we would have in school systems, you could go to a special ed class, or you could be taken out and given direct individual instruction. So what I say now is therapy, therapy, therapy. If you think something is concerning you, then it probably is a problem. And that we now with COVID, you're able to look and see therapists and individuals who can help you deal with the issues via telemed or using internet in a major way. There are all kinds of programs and services that you can do online, but it is very, very important that you get the tools necessary on how to communicate, how to share, how to deal with things that you are not necessarily accustomed to dealing with. And even those who have kids who are diagnosed with mental health challenges or learning challenges, it is important for you to make sure that you're asking your pediatrician and or your support groups, what are the things that you can do at home to help use the ways that they're using or used to use in person. The other piece is, you know, all of this online schooling, it's not for every kind of learner, right? And so there are going to be times where the kids check out. And so you need to be with grace and also have opportunities to share and advocate for your child to the schools and let them know that it's not working and what are some other ways that can happen. And then lastly, what we're noticing is that, you know, we're just all really anxious about COVID and the unknown of COVID. And so we need to start checking in and talking to our students, making sure that they know they have a safe place at home. And sometimes that means that they might have to take a day off from school, whether it's homeschool, that you just chuck it, and all of us can talk about there have been opportunities and times where we didn't even have COVID back then, but we had to just put school aside for a moment and deal with our emotional stuff that's going on in the home and or with the student in hand. So I just really want to just emphasize giving grace, and supporting each other in when you have these learning challenges, and also celebrate it. Don't look at it as a negative. They just learn differently. They have a beautiful mind.
Right.
Right. Say, okay.
Excellent. Excellent. Anybody else want to speak to that?
I'd love to. The issues that we dealt with were not as serious as what Sharon is. I just have very strong-willed kids because they have very strong-willed parents, believe it or not. And so, you know, what I would have to say is that we expect an awful lot of kids to sit in a chair for 6 hours or longer and be able to take instruction or write something out of that they don't even care about. That's really, really asking a lot for kids. Don't try to recreate the school setting in your home. That's probably one of the biggest things. You know, for what it takes all day for them to do at a school, you could probably easily do in, you know, 3 or 4 hours. And that's with breaks. Give your kids breaks, especially if they have ADD. Have a clock on the table and say, okay, this is what I want you to accomplish. I'm giving you 30 minutes to do it. And then in 30 minutes, you get a 15-minute break and you get to go outside and run around the room, building, or you know, go play ball or do something like that. And then come back in and they're refreshed and they're ready to start back again. But to sit down for nonstop 6 hours, it's just not realistic for kids. But that strong-willed nature that we sometimes go head-to-head with at home is actually going to be something that's going to bring them really far in life. Later on down the road, they're going to stand up for themselves. They're not going to be pushovers, and they're going to be the ones who know what they want and are going to go after it. Those are the things that we want from our children and for our kids. We don't want to destroy it. So it's really important that how we talk to our kids, how we talk about our kids, is something that's encouraging and uplifting of them, because they hear everything that we say. And so it's, you know, really, really important. Another thing that we did that seemed to help some is by giving choices. Okay, well, we have all of these things that we got to do today. Which one do you want to do first? Okay, we can read this book or this book. Which one do you want to read? And by giving them some control in the situation, they're a lot more likely to want to be, gosh, I can't think of the word, to go along with it, you know? My daughter called me the other day, and I would just have to encourage everybody out there who is in the midst of starting all of this process and thinking, oh my gosh, what am I doing? My daughter was like 27. She called me the other day and she said, Mom, do you remember when we did such and such crazy thing that we used to do? And, it didn't quite go to plan, but this is what ended up happening and all of this. And she was like, you have really made me realize what kind of mom I want to be. And she said, I really appreciate that. What a cool, I took that as quite the ultimate honor, because, I didn't know what I was doing. None of us do, really, when we first start. We get in there and do the best that we can with whether we have, a student who's easy or a student that's strong-willed. They say that public schools are typically designed for shy, quiet girls. And so then what we do is we medicate our boys in a lot of cases to make it so that they can sit in a school for that long. Is ADD a legitimate thing? Absolutely. I probably had it when I was a kid. But from a homeschool perspective, if you can be engaged with your kids and give them the opportunity to get out there and get that energy out and do things that's of interest to them, I promise they're going to go so much further than they ever could before.
Excellent. Excellent. How about you, Felicia?
Just real quick, I want to reiterate pretty much what Sharon was saying. My middle son was dyslexic. He had a severe form of it. And I kept looking at his developmental marks, earmarks, where I thought he should be. And I kept getting the same thing. Every kid is different. Every kid is different. But I would want to advocate, say to the parents who decide to homeschool, definitely don't ignore something that you don't feel is quite right. You really have to advocate for that child, because I'm telling you, the responses that I kept getting until I finally had him tested was that he'll be okay. He's just a slow learner, this, that, the other. But I was watching him, and I was watching the things that was going on, whereby one moment he looked like he had it together. The next moment, 10 minutes later, it's like he never heard it before. So I kept watching these things. Watch your child. You know your child best, and you will be that child's greatest advocate. Because sometimes you as the parent is the one that's going to speak up for the child that cannot articulate what's going on with him. It was extraordinarily painful. I never knew education could be painful, but he was in pain because he was having issues processing. So I just want to reiterate what she said, what Sharon was saying, don't hesitate. If you think something is wrong, follow up on it.
That is excellent. One of the questions that we're going to ask, and I want you ladies to just think about it for a second, because we do have a question from the audience, but think about this. It's coming up next. How do we measure success? How do we measure success? And the question is, what is the best way to follow up with this event? I would like to know more information. Thank you for that. Great question. Two ways. Number one, we'll be back on the air, back live tomorrow at 3 o'clock, same space, same time. The link is on the Diaspora Global PR website. You go to diasporaglobalpr.com, and the link is there for tomorrow's event. We will have a different group of speakers, some overlapping topics, but of course, a whole lot of new and different topics. Also, if you are interested in getting specific information, send us that on the Diaspora Global website. There is a comment box there. There's a connect link on there. Go to that, type it in, and we can help you to follow up and follow through and see possibly if one of these ladies here is available to help you, to speak with you, to walk you through. So those are two different things they're offering. Also, Healing Conversations, the show in its entirety will again, this is the first episode of a series of events we're going to be doing that's called Healing Conversations, where we're going to be covering all kinds of issues affecting the family, affecting us, because we believe strongly that our nation is in need of healing. Our children is in need of healing. During the George Floyd protest, there was a lot of, the whole thing was centered on, and we all felt it. Take your, I can't breathe. And when we think of some of our lives, there's so many people out there that can't breathe. They're just either boxed in or struggling emotionally or struggling in their relationship or struggling as women. They can't breathe. And our children, if you put your children in the wrong place at the wrong time for the wrong reasons, they too cannot breathe. Your children end up getting pigeonholed. They end up getting markers. They end up getting laughed at. They end up getting bullied. They end up getting, the school system runs on a singular curriculum. When you homeschool, you're all in it. You're all over the place. You're pivoting. The fabulous thing about homeschool is that we can pivot. We can move from one direction to another, and we could do it quickly. And we have to do it quickly. We don't force our children to stay in a particular space that's not working for them. And that's number one, out of compassion, and number two, out of vision and purpose. The purpose is to meet the child at the point of the child's need and help them carry that water bucket all the way to wherever they need to walk it, to throw that water out. So we don't take our children, and our vision is a little joke, For some people, the vision is the school, which is around the corner. I can see the school, that's the vision. The purpose, I could drop in there and pick them up later, so that's your vision and your purpose. And what we're asking parents to do and encouraging parents to do is to go beyond vision, go beyond the school around the corner and dropping your child at the school at 7:30 in the morning and picking your child up at 6 o'clock. All kinds of things happen in that time period, that some of which you know about and some of which you do not, that will affect your child, not just today, but affect your child lifelong. We have to get engaged. We have to circle around our children. We have to bring them into process. We have to get our feet wet. If it means not being able to get your nails done, then you can. If it means not being able to get your hair done, you can. If it means buying your sneakers at Walmart or at the thrift shop instead of buying them, at $200 Nike or Jordan sneakers, then that's what we need to do, because that's money and time that can be invested in your child's education. And the payoff for your children are huge, and the payoff for yourself is also huge. Bringing it back circle, I want to ask you ladies a question. And the question is, what was your biggest transforming process in all of this? What was your biggest transforming process? And I'm going to start this one with Christi. What was your biggest transformation for you as a person, as a human being, as a mother?
I'm not sure I understand the question. From a homeschool perspective, or
let's say from those, just from the whole academic perspective of working with your children, what was the thing in you that was transformed the most?
Well, I'd probably have to say I became a much less selfish person. I think a lot of the women here have talked about the fact that you give up everything about yourself to be able to do this for your children. And, I think that in order to be able to homeschool, that's a process that has to happen. You have to put someone else's interests above your own. And it's a struggle still work on, sometimes in life, but I can say that I think that I've gotten much better at being able to look not only at my own children, but at my own students at the Foundry and start identifying what it is that they need. And even if I'm tired, and I'm tired a lot, you make those adjustments for what that child needs right now.
Excellent. How about you, Felicia?
That's a great question. I think for me, it's twofold. I think looking at them not just as my children, not just as students, but as people, little people at the time. And I have an agenda for them, or I had an agenda for them, but in working with them, I realized they're little people who have their own thoughts and not do as I tell you to do. But when they can voice back why they do not, or what's more interesting to them, or how they would like to do it, then you're engaging in little people who have their own personalities. And as gifts, it has a way of putting me in check as to what is really my purpose, because I was very purpose driven for deciding to take upon, I call it my ministry. And so, but I think the thing that I had to come to the place was to understand that they're little people sent to me as a gift from on high. And they have something that they have to do in this world. I'm just here to help guide them. And once I understood that, it was like, it is the most wonderful thing I've ever experienced in my life. And I would do it all over again.
Okay, we're getting ready to close. We are 4 minutes, I think, or so over time. We were closing at 4:30. Again, we're back tomorrow at 3 o'clock with another panel group of women. I want to give Sharon an opportunity, though, to answer that last question before we close. And that is, what is the greatest transformation for you from the experience?
It's been to live on purpose. My sons have taught me the importance of observing them and helping them find their purpose and passion in life, and to be happy, live a happy life. And I can successfully say that while I might not have been happy, they are very happy adults, and I really love that. And so now I'm taking that time to live on purpose as I taught them to do that.
Yeah. And I thank you, ladies. And for myself, if I had to sum it up in one word, and I'm sure all of you had more than that to say about your what you experienced and how you were transformed. I think for me, the biggest takeaway is learning to say, I was wrong, or I am sorry, I didn't know it all. And that was huge. That was a huge thing, because we tend to think we're the parent, we know it all, we have it all. And so learning how to pull back and say, you know what, I was wrong in that. I didn't know that, I'm sorry. So learning to say I'm sorry was huge, was a huge transformation for me. I want to thank all you ladies for being here today. Magnificent. Come back tomorrow and support your sisters that'll be on tomorrow. And again, thank you. Thank you to our audience. Thank you to our executive producer. Thank you to our tech manager. Thank you to our young staff, our young marketing team. And thank you to our audience. And bless you guys. Have an amazing weekend. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye. All done. All done. Okay.